I rise to speak in support of the amendment in my name, which seeks to strengthen New Clause 14 in the name of the member for Spen Valley. Why do we want to restrict advertising about assisted dying? Not just because such adverts could appear crass or insensitive, not just because we worry private companies could profiteer from death. It's because advertisers know they influence choices. And the issue of choice, whether it's informed choice or skewed choice or self-coercion or coercive control, as already mentioned, is in many ways at the heart of this bill and whether its safeguards are sufficient. My brother works in advertising and he knows its power. It's why companies spend billions of pounds on it. It's why Google is the giant it is. It's why you'll see lots of adverts at Westminster Tube Station trying to influence every single one of us. It's why X is full of ads. Advertising works because we human beings are suggestible, prone to messaging, to visual cues and hints. Older people are bombarded with adverts for everything from stair lifts to care homes. One person's advert, though, is another person's public information campaign. It's not impossible to imagine a Secretary of State in future who passionately believes in the merits of assisted dying to authorise such a campaign. It could be a government-approved plotline in a soap opera. It could be an ad read out by a podcaster that ever so subtly sounds like it's a news item or even their own opinion. Many in this House rightly try to protect teenagers from online harms, but the online harm of an ad for a website about assisted dying shared on TikTok could be a reality without the tightest safeguards of my amendment. I do give way.
Anna Dixon.
I thank the honourable gentleman for speaking so clearly about the issue of advertising. Will he recognise that the reason this country has banned advertising of pharmaceuticals is so that we're not in the position that they have in America, where people are popping pills all the time? That is the reason we're protecting patients, and we need to do the same with assisted dying.
Paul Wall.
I completely agree with my honourable friend, and the dangers of what's done in America are a real lesson for us here. Now, as the honourable member for Reigate put it, conversations about assisted dying should happen in person between the relevant doctor and the patient. They should not be prompted by a TV ad or something seen on a bus. And my honourable friend, the member for Bexleyheath and Crayford, also spoke very movingly about the way that IVF services have been commercialised, leaving people who are, as he says, already on their knees and vulnerable to exploitation so that someone else can profit. I'm certain that it would be the intention of nobody in this House that passing this bill into law should mean the rise of a similarly aggressive market for assisted death. But it's our role, indeed it's our responsibility, to deal not only in intended consequences, but in unintended consequences too. And I think the real risk to the way New Clause 14 has been drafted to allow exceptions that are not specified on the face of the bill. A future Secretary of State will be empowered not only to make the necessary regulations, but to amend them at any time. And a future Secretary of State who does not share the concerns of this House would have the ability to draw the exceptions so widely as to make the ban worthless. There are a number of similar bans in advertising already in place on tobacco products, on surrogacy, on the latest cancer drugs being marketed to the public. In every case, the legislation sets out the exceptions, leaving no room for doubt as to how Parliament intended that the public should be protected. Why should the services that this bill would legalise not be subject to that same legal clarity? Do people who have less time to live not deserve all the protection we have the power to give them from a death they do not truly want? I cannot believe this Parliament would be content to have that power taken out of its hands and the rights of our most vulnerable constituents left for someone else to decide on some other day. My amendment therefore sets out that exceptions to the advertising ban should be limited to cases where a person has requested information and cases where the materials are intended for health professionals and not for their patients. New Clause 14 allows a future Secretary of State to make provisions that would usually have to go through the House in legislation. It's not at all clear to me why this power is needed in order to introduce a ban on advertising. I will give way.
Sir John Hayes.
No, I'm very grateful, gentleman. I entirely support his argument and his amendment. This is the difference between, in the mover's estimation, accepting a request and promoting a service. Advertising is about the promotion of a service to doubtful, fearful and vulnerable people, and that's precisely what his amendment addresses.
I agree with the honourable gentleman, and there's a wider point here. This is about the Henry VIII powers that are in this bill. And there would be one-third of those added to the bill. This would be the third Henry VIII power added to this bill since second reading. At that stage, at second reading, it had none. The Attorney-General Lord Hermer has said that excessive reliance on these Henry VIII powers upsets the proper balance between Parliament and the Executive, and he's right. But away from matters of constitutional principle, I'm especially concerned that a practical impact of such a power would allow a future Secretary of State to change the law as set out in the Suicide Act of 1961. This is the act that contains the offence of encouraging or assisting a suicide. Ministers have confirmed that the bill, as drafted, leaves the offence in place in all cases except where a medical practitioner assists a person to die under provisions of the Act. We must surely, therefore, not hand the power to a future Secretary of State to weaken or even abolish that offence without the need for primary legislation. My amendment, therefore, specifies that the Suicide Act cannot be amended in this way. I hope that my honourable friend for the member for Spen Valley will recognise my amendment does not seek to undo or undermine her own amendment, but rather to build on it and also to ensure the ban she intends to deliver doesn't collapse around the loophole at its heart.
On that point,
Yeah.
I thank him for giving way. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I think he's making a really powerful point, and I think there is consensus across the House around banning advertising of assisted dying services. His amendment, there would be slightly limited in it, just makes 2 exceptions, and there would probably need to be a broader piece of work to be done around that, but I would commit to working with him on that if he's interested.
Paul Ward.
I think the point of my amendment is to make sure that a future Secretary of State would have to come before this House with primary legislation. Now, the report stage of this bill is not about the principles of this bill. It's not about whether a member may in principle support the idea of assisted dying, as the Mr. Speaker will point out to everybody who strays from this amendment. It's about this individual bill before us today. We have to ask, what will it mean in the real world for our very real constituents? I won't give way, I'm short of time. Just how strong are this bill's safeguards? We're not commentators, we are legislators. Our job is to scrutinise, to test and test again the bills that come to this place. I spent 26 years up there in the press gallery writing about politics, but the big difference between them and us is that we have a vote in this place. And with that vote, particularly a free vote, comes responsibility. And there's no greater responsibility than protecting the vulnerable from feeling they have to end their life. And that's why I've tabled this amendment today. I'm not driven by religion, though I don't believe that those with religious faith should be denigrated or patronised as they have been during this bill. It's worth saying that some of those who passionately support assisted dying often have a devout faith, that their worldview is the right one. I'm driven instead by my duty as a legislator to get this bill right, and by what I see as my moral duty to protect the most vulnerable in society. I believe my duty is to protect those who don't have celebrity names or campaign groups behind them, the people who don't get heard, who don't want to be a bother, who don't want to make a fuss, who feel at the end of their lives they're a burden on their family but may never say so. I worry about the unheard, the unseen, the ignored and the marginalised. Most of all, I worry about the heartbreaking modesty of that phrase you often hear from older people, I don't want to be any trouble, love. We need, for their sakes, to make sure the safeguards in this bill are the strongest they can possibly be.
Dame Caroline Dunn.